Today, the electors are going to the polls and we'll actually have a new president, likely by the end of the day. I say likely, there is some slim hope by some of those on the far left in this country. That means everybody who isn't a Republican or conservative. Those on the far left in this country that somehow the electors, that 37 of them or so will defect and that they'll end up voting for John Kasich. They'll throw this into the House of Representatives where, by the way, Donald Trump would then be elected president by the overwhelming majority in the House. So it's just wishful thinking on their part, and this is the last gasp. We talked about this last week, and of course, four of those electors here in Idaho all expected to vote for Donald Trump today. There are some of the people on the left, the liberals, are claiming they've convinced as many as 20 people to bail out, but um, we've talked before about the ill effects of smoking wacky weed, and now you're seeing that come to fruition in this entire situation. You didn't have to go too far in the western states, though, to find some people, and I'm not even talking California, who are unable to come to grips with what's going to happen today. 7 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. These are some sounds from some demonstrators who were at a candlelight vigil in Arizona. Media's got to run out and cover that. Yes. Here are liberals. Here are liberals lighting candles. Here are liberals singing. Here are liberals chanting. This is very important. Even Mike Barnacle, the flaming liberal and plagiarist over at MSDNC, said this morning on Morning Joe that this has gotten ridiculous and that he said we're giving so much attention to this story and it doesn't deserve it. But this is the sound from the liberal whack jobs in Arizona calling on the electors to forget Donald Trump and go as somebody else.
I think if we had the chance, we would choose just about anybody else who had the temperament. And with all this, the drama that's swirling around, I think that the electors should send it to the House.
This is a part of our country. It's different, and we can use it. This is something that electors they can change their vote if they want.
God share His grace.
Not too late. Don't Trump. Not too late. Don't Trump. Not too late.
I wonder if they were sitting down when they sang America the Beautiful. Of course, if they sang the national anthem, this same crowd would take a seat, right? I got a thought on all of this. Liberals and this derangement syndrome that seems to be just it's growing on the left. I mean, it is getting so outsized. Why is that happening? Well, there was an interesting story the other day at Washington Examiner, and America's homosexual population was surveyed about their attitudes before Election Day and their attitudes after Election Day. Now, that community is apparently in a deep, deep depression because the numbers have dropped dramatically. I mean, in double digits. Their hopes and their concerns about the future, I mean, they are just living under an enormous dark cloud right now. And so you ask yourself, why is that? Because Donald Trump even said during his nomination speech in Cleveland, Ohio, at the Republican Party convention, that he would defend the LGBTQ community in this country. And at one rally, he is photographed holding up a rainbow flag. Donald Trump is not a conservative. Donald Trump, indeed, may be the most libertarian when it comes to social issues person ever elected on the Republican side. So why are all of these people so upset? Now, this is not meant to be a tirade against that particular community, but you look across the spectrum, the Democrat Party is a coalition of all of these various special interest groups, and that's just one of them. But why are they upset? And all of those special interest groups are upset. Did a little reading this morning, and I saw a piece that referenced the Third Amendment to the Constitution, which doesn't get a whole heck of a lot of attention. It was a relic after the Revolutionary War. The British used to quarter soldiers in Americans' homes. Basically, they would just come by and requisition your property and stay there. So the founding fathers said, hey, this is wrong. People have property rights. People have privacy in their own homes. The old line that came out of England, a man's home is his castle, is essentially a legal tenant dealing with all of that. So that amendment simply says the government can't just come bursting in and then sit down at your dinner table, empty your refrigerator, and then sleep in your bed. because somebody says, well, we need it right now. Madison, James Madison, who is the father of the U.S. Constitution, he's the brains behind it. In his writings at the founding of this country, he said that there's a broader notion to this amendment than just your home. And he said that broader notion is that your thoughts, your conscience, are also your property. Think about that for a moment. So if you have certain religious beliefs, and your religious beliefs tell you and inform you that you can't participate in certain ceremonies, then the government cannot, according to the Third Amendment, even though it says, it prohibits the quartering of troops in your home, the government can also not force you to go against your conscience, which is also your personal property. This is from the man who is really the author of the U.S. Constitution, as I just said, James Madison. Now, during the course of the Obama years, we have seen cake bakers and wedding photographers who have been told that they will comply when someone shows up and says, bake us a cake for our same-sex wedding, or make us T-shirts. Well, they don't do it to Muslims. They only do it to Christians, which there's a whole entire show that I could do there otherwise. But they come in and they tell people, we want you to do this. They literally target Christian businesses. And then the government, state and federal government, come in and tell those businesses if they don't participate, then they are going to face severe fines for their intransigence. In other words, we will bankrupt you, we will put you out of business, who knows, we may even put you in jail. Now, I cited this on air, I think one day last week. I'm a big fan of the film and the play A Man for All Seasons. Now, a lot of what you actually hear in the dialogue in the play and the movie comes from historical records. So we know indeed that the man, the star of the show, St. Thomas More, that he said these things. You remember he lost his head because he wouldn't go along with his king divorcing Queen Catherine, and then his king marrying Anne Boleyn and declaring himself the head of the church in England. You can argue the politics of that all you want, but More's conscience would not allow him to acquiesce. So More was being bullied, we'll put it that way, by a group of his former friends to sign on and get on board, and he was still refusing. And finally, his closest friend, the Duke of Norfolk, said to him, oh, come on, Thomas, please sign for, the rest of us have. Just come along for fellowship. And Thomas More said, and if I sign and that condemns my soul to hell, will you go to hell with me for fellowship? And the Archbishop then jumped in and said, do you think we're all going to hell because we're signing this? And Thomas More said, I don't know about the rest of you. I just know it violates my conscience. In other words, I have freedom. I have the liberty of conscience. It is my private property. That notion is going back hundreds of years in our culture, which comes, of course, from English parliamentary culture. This is something that we have to acknowledge, and yet the Obama White House, now keep in mind, he likes to speak about freedom of worship. In other words, he doesn't even use freedom of religion. And that's a subtle shift, but it's intentional. And it means that you go into that box and you sit there in front of the altar for 1 hour on Sunday, and then you check your faith at the door when you leave. That's what they're trying to tell you. But that's not what the First Amendment says. It says freedom of religion, which protects your conscience, and your conscience then is also, according to Madison, protected by the Third Amendment. Now, Obama's Justice Department and his minions have been telling people across the country that some rights have to be subservient to other rights. But here's the thing. They're forcing you to go against your religious conscience so that you don't hurt somebody's feelings, if their feelings are indeed hurt in the first place, because they can always go find some other cake baker, T-shirt maker, or photographer. But the goal is to just to force you to comply with their belief system about the world, their new world order, if you will. And that's the point. There is no right anywhere in the Constitution that says your feelings will not be hurt. So they're making this up. They're saying that you have to give up your freedom of religion, as well as your right to your private property, your thoughts and your beliefs, in order that somebody else doesn't have their feelings ruffled just a little bit. which again, there's nothing in the Constitution anywhere that says you have protection against your feelings being hurt. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Remember that one? My mom and dad repeated that so often in my life. I've learned to live by it. And that's the thing. Liberals of all different, in that liberal coalition of all different beliefs, have had the media, academia, and Hollywood joining in with them, pounding on Americans with traditional values for decades now, telling you you better get with the program or else they're going to harm you. Donald Trump represents a change. Now, he has said he will not harm anybody in any of these other groups. But he has also said he is going to protect those people who have traditional beliefs, and he is not going to violate their conscience or force them to violate their conscience to comply with man's law versus God's law. And that has the liberals seething. That's what this thing has all been about. First of all, it was the FBI, and then it was the Russians. And now it's the evils of the Electoral College being outdated and antiquated. You understand, they just keep throwing everything up there, hoping it's going to stick. But the ultimate goal is much bigger here, and that is to coerce you to join in various cultural practices that you don't approve of. And you're not saying, and I'm not saying, stop. We're not pushing anyone back into a closet. No, in fact, we're saying we don't want to be backed into a corner. And we expect a quid pro quo with all of this. It's 8:18. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. By the way, we won on November 8th. You lost. You got it? We've had to live 8 years under that famous line from President Obama. Now, I don't mean to be intimidating or to insult you or anything else, but I'm telling you, and payback, this is not about vengeance. This is just simply we are going to live as the free people that our founders told us we were, as imbued with the liberties given us by our God. Might have been a little bit of a redundancy in that, but you understand what I'm talking about. Hey, look, we've got a short break coming up in just a moment. Randy Staples at 8:40 this morning. Don Chandler joining us just after 9 o'clock this morning. He's going to talk to us about my diet. I've lost in excess of 50 pounds in about 3 months, and he's had some similar success. That's on the way later this morning on Top Story with Bill Colley. Right now it's 20 after 9, and it's 8 degrees. It will get better. Also want to mention, coming up on Wednesday on our program between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, we're going to be joined by one of the medical pros from Trip Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls, Idaho. We do this on Wednesday mornings. It's called Better Health. They'd like to remind you life's too short not to feel good. This week, of course, we'll be taking some of your telephone calls as well. Dr. Tripp's office still looking for new patients, and they can often see you. That doesn't mean it's a guarantee, but often see you. If you call with an ailment in the morning, they can often see you on the very same day. Trip Family Medicine is located on Fillmore Street in Twin Falls, directly across from the main post office. I saw something today at the Daily Caller, which I wanted to share with you that I think helps shed a little light on this. Despite a media blitz portraying fake news sites as having a real impact in national politics and even capable of affecting the outcome of a presidential election, fake news sites struggle to reach any sort of real audience. Fake news site DenverGuardian.com, for instance, the subject of coverage from the New York Times and Pravda on the Potomac, is ranked 91,688 in web traffic in the U.S. According to Web Analytics, and to put that number in perspective, the site supposedly impacting the national political scene is more than 84,000 slots behind the website of a Virginia community college, which was picked at random from the list. Doesn't that tell you a little bit about media's, how shall we call it, collusion in all of this? It certainly does. Howard Kurtz, he has a show over at Fox News, used to be with CNN. Howard Kurtz is a media critic, and he says that even many of his fellow journalists have completely lost their minds.
Well, this is really starting to sound like Trump derangement syndrome. And let's just flip the script for just a second. So imagine that Hillary Clinton had narrowly won an electoral college victory, but lost a popular vote. And a lot of people were really upset about that, and they thought there were other reasons. And then imagine if there were people on the right who were saying, if we can just get some electors to flip, we could deny Hillary Clinton the presidency. What would the New York Times, the Washington Post, and networks, the magazines, the Huffington Post, and most websites do? They would go insane. They would say this is stealing the election. Well, guess what? It would be stealing the election. Now, it's not going to happen, so maybe I have wasted your time, but it is so telling that even people, some people in the mainstream media think this is a viable course of action. That's crazy.
And I'll get to our telephone callers in just about 30 seconds. Telephone number 7360300 here at News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. The show is Top Story with Bill Colley. Just a reminder, at Mount Harrison Audiology, they're offering a new device that is far better than any previous hearing device on the market. And this is for people who may be struggling with hearing. And it's not always just people who are older. They're offering a 2-week trial, I should point out. Somewhere in there I said free week, and I mean 2 weeks. 2-week free trial with these new devices. You can call today to schedule your personal fitting appointment. Open your world to better hearing. You can call Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert, the number 312-0957. That's 312-0957. Caller, you're up next. You're on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Well, December 15th was the anniversary of the signing of the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. George Mason led the way. Actually, Madison was against adding any amendments, but thank God he didn't get his way on that particular issue. But Jefferson and the rest of them all said, and let me go back a little bit. This deal about quartering troops goes way back to the 1600s. The French Huguenots, if you were a follower of Martin Luther, they came in, they brought the troops a soldier could be put in your home, he could rape your wife, your daughters. He basically become Lord and Master of your house. So this had been going on clear from back in the 1600s.
And a little bit of history with
earlier.
that, too. Nigel Farage, of course, the legendary British politician, his family fled. They were Huguenots. They fled to England for that very reason.
Yeah, and so, Jefferson said in 1808, he said, every religious society has the right to determine for itself the times for the exercises and objects the proper for them according to their particular tenets. And basically saying the Constitution forbids the government from being involved with religious institutions, doctrines, disciplines, and exercises. Those are his words. This results not only from the provision that no law shall be made respecting the establishment or free exercise of religion, but also that which reserves to the states the powers not delegated to the U.S. government. So, it's a states' rights issue, and if the states, but the idea was, of course, there would be separation. They didn't want a state church like the Church of England, but they did not want the federal government to have a national church. But each individual denomination, all they wanted was that there would be freedom to be able to exercise religion. In fact, the Northwest Ordinance, of course, Bill said there would be religion,
right,
morality, and knowledge taught in the schools and so forth. But, of course, we see very little knowledge, and the other two have totally been excluded.
Hey, thank you much for the call. And speaking of that, I was doing some reading last week on this, that those early drafts of the Bill of Rights, actually there were 12 that were supposed to originally be voted upon, and the first two, it turns out, we think of the First Amendment offering the 5 liberties that it grants, and then the Second Amendment, of course, your right to bear arms. But actually, they were 3 and 4. The other 2 amendments, and one of them finally got passed, I believe, in 1991, a no law varying the compensation for the services of the senators and representatives shall take effect until an election of representatives shall have intervened. That was on the board for over 200 years before they finally had enough states come along and ratify it. And it went from being among the first 2, now it's the 27th Amendment. The other dealt with term limits, which, if we get a chance, I've got some more detail on the history of that. Maybe we can touch on that before the end of the program today. Sometimes it's like trying to squeeze 5 hours of talk into 2 hours. It's not always easy to get done. Coming up on 8:27 or 8:28, actually, Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. Currently, we're at 8. Doesn't that sound nice? We're at 8 degrees. Just sooner or later, this is going to pass, but not soon enough for most of us. One other thing, all of this talk about the Russians. I want to share with you, if we get a chance in the next segment of the program, some comments from Admiral James Woolsey. Now, he worked for Bill Clinton in intelligence, and then he ended up being an advisor during Donald Trump's campaign. So the liberals now hate him. They despise him because he jumped ship and he joined the other side in their view. He was being asked by Martha Raddatz over at ABC News could make a train take a dirt road. He was being questioned by her yesterday, and he might be a little too wise for some of these network TV types. I want to share something that he said if we get an opportunity in the next break or after this break in the next 5 minutes. But he went on to talk about how you can disguise a hack to make it look like it's somebody else doing it. And somebody sent me something yesterday suggesting that some of the hacking going on was actually being done by rogue elements at the Department of Homeland Security. That's what that whole brouhaha is with the state of Georgia right now. They've discovered that somebody at Homeland Security was hacking into their systems. Short break coming up. As I mentioned, it's 8:29, and right now it's 8. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. Just wanted to mention our good friends at Waddell & Reed in Twin Falls. They've been in business now almost 80 years, one of the oldest firms offering mutual funds, and they offer 2 varieties. They invest in a conservative nature. This is not some sort of casino because they're looking out for you in the long run. I want to point out, too, they haven't been in business that long because, well, let's face it, if you're in business 80 years, you're doing something right. And they work with you individually to build your proper expectations, knowing that each person who walks through that door has a different set of needs and goals. They help you manage your money, and they take the planning personally. We've got plenty more coming up.